wait, right? Uh, Yunsung, we should wait. Normally, we wait about 15 minutes. Like we usually have that Berlin Standard Time, you know, plus minus. Yeah.
Okay, I see. I see.
Yeah, I'm sure people will drop in slowly. Yeah.
So you're also part of the Impact Tribe?
Yes, I'm part of the Impact Tribe, as in Sustainability Discourse Berlin. Yeah.
All right, cool.
So I was just reading up your profile. SPRK Food. You guys
SPRK.
work.
It's basically it basically means spark, but the domain was taken, so we decided to just leave the vocal beside and go with Spark.
Okay. And let me try to see if I can Google. Do you have a web page Spark something? If I Google.
Yeah, it's really rudimentary and not.
Spark.global, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Real impact. I've seen some organizations which works on looking at food waste in Berlin.
There's actually several companies that do that. Which one did you come across?
I don't remember the names. They collect. I think Yunsung and William might better remember the names. They collect waste from not waste. The um, uh, kind of waste from the supermarket, and they cook, and then they invite people, and then sometimes they feed the homeless as well.
Okay. But it's not Tafel, right? Which is like a big food bank here.
Which one?
A Tafel?
No, it's not Tafel.
Talking about the Real Junk Food Project, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Real Junk Food Project. I think I haven't heard about that one.
Okay. Spark, you guys are doing pretty well, yeah. Impact Hub.
Yeah, well, we are closely connected. We know Leon from Impact Hub.
Okay. Yeah, of course. And how many team members are you at the moment, Spark?
So at the moment we're 6 people, but it's fluctuating quite a lot. So I've been with Spark for almost 1.5 years, and the amount of people really have fluctuated during that time, really depending on the amount of interns we had on board. And yeah, some people left, some people joined, so it's a come and go. Young Sun has also been part of our teams for a couple of months.
Ah, great.
Yeah, she has some insights and know how we work. That's actually also how the connection came together.
Ah, okay, I see. Okay, nice. And are most of the team volunteers, or?
Well, we all have in mind that we soon have paid jobs, so we are all, having that, well, call it entrepreneurial risk. I don't know, of the idea
Yeah.
not working out,
Mm-hmm.
but we all have the objective to
Mm-hmm.
well, get paid after the funding is secured. So that's
Okay. Mm-hmm.
the stage we're at right now.
Okay. So this is a very young organization, so to say.
Yes, I mean, well, um, it's roughly 2.5 years old, so it's not
Okay.
that young, but we were just officially founded a couple of months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we've slowly started to build up traction, to show that to investors. Yeah, and we are slowly ramping up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's yeah, the term is gaining a lot of traction, social entrepreneurship, and yeah, people misusing those terms as well. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I
And
mean, there are lots of conversation around social entrepreneurship now. Uh, Recently, uh, it's gaining momentum as a
mhm.
concept. Yeah, and
But do you feel it? Well, I didn't quite get it. Do you feel people are misusing the terms to, well, greenwash their business, or is it more so a term that people are not familiar with yet because it's just gaining the momentum, as you just said?
yeah, in the sense, I think the term is very broad at the moment. I'm new to this, so the term for me is quite new, and then there is no, at the moment, it includes a lot of entrepreneur activity, and
Hmm.
there is no set boundary in terms of uh, what, in terms of the definition of what we really mean by social entrepreneurship. Um, I'm just wondering if within the scientific and the social community, is there a
Well,
agreed, established?
well, there's kind of a definition, but I'm going to touch base on that in a second. And
Yeah.
there's also some, yeah, I would say, characteristics that make a social
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur. But I'm
Yeah.
also going to talk about that and talk about my view on that topic. But
Nice.
I agree, it's kind of a term that is there, and it's kind of misleading for some people sometimes. And yeah, there's lots of different opinions and views on this topic. So
Mm-hmm. Mm.
yeah, that's why it's sometimes not so clear, and
Yeah.
the borders are kind of fluctuating and not super
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I
right.
think it's good to hear a perspective from practitioners like you guys. Like in terms of yeah, your thoughts. Yeah. Quite excited. Yeah. Mm.
I just wanted to quickly say that we're going to be recording this session. So if anybody doesn't want to be on that recording, just let us know, and we will say if you want to ask a question, you don't want to be in the video afterwards, we'll like edit it out or something like this. So just to
Okay.
let you know that we're going to be recording.
Mm. Sure. Mm.
And then I guess Youngsun, maybe you'd like to start, I guess.
One second, I need to remove this chat here, and I don't know how. Here we go. Okay.
Oops. So we are 18 participants. Will?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought we're the only, I just see 4 people on the screen, so I thought it was just 4 of us.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Sorry, I've been talking too long.
Yeah, so can I start the evening? I mean, this evening event?
Go ahead, Jungsun.
Okay.
The stage is yours.
Okay, so hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to our virtual event at Sustainability Discourse. I'm your host, Yoon-sun. Today, we're going to have a talk about CSR and social entrepreneurship. You may have heard about the concept corporate social responsibility, CSR, meaning corporations take responsibilities for society and the environment while making profits. And the discussion has been there for a long time since we have observed there were many companies which neglected to contribute to making a better world. But fortunately, we see many more companies nowadays incorporate this concept in their business, and I have different strategies on it. However, there are some companies which have been concerned about their responsibilities from the start of their business, and they are categorized in social enterprises, and we will learn more about them. So tonight's guest is Felix Faller, who was my coworker a few months ago, and he is a co-founder of SPRK, which is a Berlin-based social enterprise focusing on food waste. So now I guess it's time to meet Felix, and let's listen carefully to him. Yeah, Felix, go ahead.
All right, thanks for the introduction, and thanks first of all for having me. I'm really excited to share some of my insights and why I think social entrepreneurship is so important right now and will gain more importance in the future. But first of all, let me quickly touch base on what Jung-sun just said. So CSR, that is a term that's been around for a while. It stands for corporate social responsibility. I'm more so talking about new startups, so not established corporates and their social responsibility. So well, let's dive into it. So first of all, I would give you a brief overview of what the agenda will look like. I'm going to give you an introduction. That introduction then will link to social entrepreneurship. I'm going to quickly talk about why we actually need progress, even if it might sound quite obvious to some of you. I think it's nevertheless really important. Then, as I just said, we are going to look at some of the main characteristics of social entrepreneurs. And as a last main point, I would like to showcase some of the successful startups and successful entrepreneurs that I really admire. And then I'm of course also going to talk a little bit about SPRK and what our mission and vision is, and how we are dealing with the topic of food waste. So well, I would like to start with a statement, and I would like to ask you guys to be more unreasonable in the future. And I hope after this talk, some of you guys, or hopefully lots of you guys, want to actually become more unreasonable. Well, quickly to touch on the term unreasonable, it means irrational, silly, inadequate. So these are the terms that come up if you research unreasonability, and you might ask yourself, well, why does Felix want me to become more unreasonable? Because, well, in the Western world, we are raised with reason. Reason gives us better careers and better lives. But I would like to give you this quote, which really caught my attention. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one adapts the world to himself. Therefore, all the progress depends on the unreasonable man. This is a quote from George Bernard Shaw. And it caught my attention for many reasons, because I feel if we want to move forward to create a just and sustainable society, we need more people that want to break through the status quo, so that want to become more unreasonable and trigger these changes that we need nowadays. So I fully support this view. Also, if you think of people from the past that were deemed unreasonable, like the first people that wanted to go to the moon, or the first people to create the internet, were deemed super unreasonable. And also nowadays, most innovation that is being developed is coming usually from people that are looked at it in a weird way, in a bit silly way. And I personally think these unreasonable people need to come up front to showcase their abilities. And for me, it's obvious that unreasonable dreams can come true and that they can provide progress. So to define the term social entrepreneurship or social entrepreneur a bit closer, because I'm naming it quite frequently throughout this talk, a social entrepreneur is a person that tries to solve a social problem using entrepreneurial skills. So one of my unreasonable heroes is Mohamed Yunus, who some of you might know. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006, and his unreasonable idea was to provide small and unsecured loans to the poorest in society. Actually, that was in Bangladesh. And it took him actually 30 years of research on microloans for these poor people, mainly women in rural areas. And that was completely contrary to all the banks that existed back then, because actually nobody would help these people, and thus they'd be stuck in this vicious cycle of not getting out of poverty. But his company has provided $5 billion to 5 million people to help them to free themselves from this poverty trap, which I think is an incredible achievement. And this means progress to me. So I believe there's really a strong correlation between unreasonable people and progress, especially if it's combined with social entrepreneurship. So, well, but why do we need this progress, you might ask? Because in the last 60 years, we had massive growth, and our welfare, our overall wealth globally has risen to a massive extent, but still we haven't quite managed to address major global challenges. Just to name a few, we are depleting our resources in an unprecedented pace. In 80% of the countries, the gap between rich and poor is growing actually, and Germany is one of these countries. There is no access to clean water in many poorer countries, which should be a given nowadays. There's 1 billion out of the 2 billion kids growing up on this planet. They're growing up in poverty, and there's many more problems. One of which I'm going to talk about a little bit more is food waste. But I just feel this is a really unacceptable situation, and we need to find new solutions to these challenges. And entrepreneurs choose to oftenly see opportunities where most of the people see problems. They are the ones to swim against the stream and that are being unreasonable. And they are trying to new business model to try and create innovation. So this is one characteristic of them. But just to name a few other characteristics, identified that make a successful entrepreneur. First and foremost, they have a theory of change. So social entrepreneurs, they're not happy with a given situation and they want to change that situation. It's kind of hard to measure these changes, but impact is a way to measure these changes, and that's their major driver. So impact is really important. Also, they want to create change through a viable business model, which means they want to be independent. There's many charities and NGOs out there that are doing a great job, but they're just greatly dependent on funds and help from other people. So that's something social entrepreneurs try to distance themselves from, and they want to build a market-based solution, which means building up a for-profit company so they can also scale, they can attract talents, and they can do all these important entrepreneurial activities to bring a business forward and to raise their impact. Last, and I think not least for sure, is that most of the most ambitious entrepreneurs, they really want to generate a systematic change, meaning that their change should be much bigger than their own enterprise. So now I would like to talk about some of the social entrepreneurs that I learned a lot from. So I've talked about Mohamed Yunus, who is the godfather of microloans, so to say, which is a really common practice throughout the world now. But he probably wouldn't have been there if Bill Drayton wasn't there. The founder of Ashoka, he's basically one of the first guys to found a company that was building up a network of social entrepreneurs. It was founded in 1980s in Washington, D.C. in the States. And he was the first one to develop factors that would distinguish social enterprises from normal enterprises. And he is building up a huge network and supporting these people to succeed in their mission to create a better world. So in case you're interested, Ashoka is a really great website that I can recommend you. They are listing so-called Ashoka Fellows. And in every country they have, so throughout the whole world, they have about 3,000 organizations that are under the umbrella of Ashoka. And I'm sure in all of the countries, wherever you might be, there are certain Ashoka fellows, and I've stumbled across so many impressive stories and businesses that that caught my attention through this website. It's really a reliable source to identify new opportunities to also join these startups. And Bill Drayton, as I said, was one of the first one to bring this topic into society. Well, the next example I would like to give is Ecosia. You guys might have heard of it. It's a Berlin-based startup or social enterprise that has been around for 10 years plus. And it is basically, for you that don't know, it's a search engine that is actually planting trees. So Christian's vision was to not only create a business and maximize profits, but rather to maximize the welfare of society by planting trees. This is their vision, and what Ecosia does is they're spending 40 to 50% of their monthly revenue to plant trees around the world and thus build communities that are self-reliant and sustainable. The third example I would like to talk about, and maybe you guys have some questions about that afterwards, is my own story in SPRK. So SPRK was founded in the start of 2018, and we've seen that food waste, especially in Germany, but throughout the whole world, is a huge problem. We have got 1.6 billion tons of food that is wasted annually, which roughly translates to 30% of the whole production. So you can just imagine how much resources, how much labor, how much CO2 emissions during logistics, or also when the food is rotting, is emitted. So it is a major driver in our global warming. And actually, just as a comparison, many people think that air traffic is one of the worst contributors to global warming, but it's not. It's actually just accounting for 2%, whereas food waste accounts to 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. So this is something that we saw, and we tried to build a solution for that. And our solution is that we are really supplier focused. So we look at all the players along the supply chain, from farmers to producers to wholesales, to logistics, to the actual supermarkets. And that's where we are trying to save food. And we have basically two major channels how to redistribute that food back into society. One being an offline way, meaning we are processing the food and selling it in so-called delis throughout the town, and later also throughout the country. And this is really critical because some of this food, as you can imagine, is close before perishable. It's close to perishing. So we needed to find a way how to make that food last longer, and that's why we actually decided to build up an offline distribution, which is quite capital heavy, but we needed to bring these foods back into society. On the other hand, which gives us the ability to scale our business in the long term, is an online marketplace, so a technology approach where we are trying to match the surplus food that we are saving in certain locations, and then offering NGOs and other charities to buy these foods for a much lower price than the actual market price. And we also provide the logistics to transport these foods to the people that really need it in society. My role there is to plan the logistics, and I'm also on the supply side of things, looking at the suppliers are happy, sorry, and of course we give them the benefit that they save the disposal costs, which is actually quite high. You might not imagine, but it's actually quite high. So it means our activities actually mean an economical benefit for our suppliers. So if you look at the triple bottom line model, so economical, social, and ecological, we are all contributing to these three columns, which makes it a win-win-win situation. And this is for me a perfect example of how social enterprises should look in the future, and how many more corporations should actually work. So yeah, I hope that some of you are inspired by what I just said, and that you're willing to join this movement, not necessarily by founding your own startup or enterprise, but also by informing yourself and using these services. Or also a topic that is quite big at the moment is the whole shared economy. So if you're looking into buying a new car, for example, maybe consider using shared mobility. And I also chose this topic because I want to show people that profit and purpose are not mutually exclusive elements of business. And I really want to expose people to the growing field of social entrepreneurship and highlight the meaningful opportunities that exist at the intersection of public and private sector. And just to quickly touch base on what has been written in the introduction, where Milton Friedman was quoted in saying that profit will contribute to the overall welfare of a state, and that's why this should be the major driver. I would argue against that, and I actually believe that this is the start of a transformation of a capitalism where success is hopefully not measured by that, but rather by the social impact it achieves. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might have appeared during this talk or that you generally have about the topic itself.
Yeah, so thank you, Felix, for your nice presentation. And yeah, so now we hope you guys have questions for Felix. And Will, can you unmute people if they have?
Yeah, you can either go for the chat room, or maybe if there's, you can unmute yourself as well if you prefer.
I have a question.
Yes,
First of all, thank you.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, myself, being like on the consumer end, and one thing I'm often very concerned about, I don't know so much about CSR, but one thing I'm often concerned about is greenwashing. Where companies, pretend to be more green or more environmental than they are. And I was wondering, are there any ways to recognize social enterprises versus companies that maybe only, seem to be doing good? Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that's really depending on the individual case, and you really need to research the individual company that you are curious about, because as you said, greenwashing, also blue washing is something that occurs, but in my experience, more so in bigger corporations that are using CSR kind of a protective shield and trying to highlight how well they're doing, but the imbalance of their harming activities are sometimes not balancing out the good that they are doing. So I think it's pretty hard to just give you a yes or a no, or they are doing it good and they are doing it bad. But I personally think most of the companies that are being really transparent are also the ones that are being honest, and they are being honest about their CSR activities. I've briefly talked about Ecosia, and if you look at their website, for example, they'll tell you exactly what they do with their revenue. They tell you how much each month went into fixed costs, into marketing activities, but most importantly also into tree planting, which is their major impact driver. Quite hard to give a final one there. It's really depending on the individual company.
Okay, but thank you. It was interesting.
Of course. course, Nora.
Can I add to that? Yeah. In terms of that's a very interesting question, and I just want to add to that. In terms of sustainability, or as I discussed with you, Felix, from the first of all, thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I have so many questions, but I'll leave my questions aside. But in terms of, I didn't see that we were 18 of us, so I was talking in the beginning, but now I wouldn't. But yeah, in terms of CSR, or in terms of like social movement, like sustainable initiative or social entrepreneurship, the challenge from me, coming from a sustainable perspective, sustainable researcher, we have this challenge of standardizing. How do we evaluate what is whether we are actually making changes in terms of CSR, or as you talked about, triple bottom line. For example, like we have companies saying that they would invest 10 million for child education in developing countries, but that is just a number. Many companies do not have a proper operational plan in terms of, okay, where, how many kids would be affected, for example, and
I see your point, this is a very important factor, and this is why I also think one of the main characteristic is tracking your impact, and maybe you can explain on the example of SPRK. So sometimes it's quite hard, especially if you talk about education, to track your impact, and numbers are not really meaningful to most of the people. Nevertheless, we, for example, developed an index, so we can say that with 1 kilogram of saved food, we are actually preventing 2.3 kilograms of CO2 and other greenhouse gases to go into the air. So it's important for every good entrepreneur to identify a metrics, how to actually track their activities and their contribution to well-being of the overall society. We chose like this index that I just explained, but just spending money and saying, well, now I'm off, now I did my part, is not enough in my belief, because money might end up somewhere where you not want it to end up. You cannot really make sure that it ends up where it's supposed to end up, and this is why I think impact and impact metrics is so important.
Yeah, I just want to add last thing to that. You talked about indicators and indexes, and this might also be linked to what Bruno is asking in terms of regulation, standardization. When we look at sustainable initiative in across the world, I think one of the most positive thing that has come up from EU is I've share that link on our chat as well. EU taxonomy on sustainable activity or sustainable finance. So they've come up with, when you talk about different aspect of the triple bottom line, what should be the taxonomy, standardized indicators. So for now, coming back to Nora's question, for now, they haven't looked at what should be the indicator for CSR. The last report that have come up in March 2020, they've said the way forward would be looking at CSR activity in terms of coming up with indicators. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't really grasp the question.
Sorry, that was just a comment.
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, I have also one question, but before I ask a question, I would relate to Nora. Nora, I think the distinction is relatively easy. if any project or any corporation, whether it has a social entrepreneurship name or whatever, if it does not have a community backing, right? It is simply, you can decide it, okay, this is a bunch of intelligent people and they think that they have a solution, right? So then they are coming forward and trying to sell their solution. But if it has no community backing behind it, I would be very careful. And good example of it is fair trade. So we were told fair trade is very nice thing. So they are really giving good money to the farmers or to the producers or whatever. So what they did, let's say they take 20 cent more, they put the first of all the burden onto the consumer on in European or in Western countries. So the 20 cent what the Western consumer is paying extra, how much of this is going to the farmer in Africa or in Latin America who are producing beans, coffee, and all these things? If €1 is going extra, 1 cent goes to the farmer in these countries. So can you see how big they are making the difference? So all this profit is going somewhere in between and nobody talks about it. First thing. Second thing is, my question is to now to Felix. Felix, thanks for the discussion, and the start was really good, that one should be really unreasonable. So I hope you would allow me to be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and tell me, any social entrepreneur who said, I am going to listen what the communities are asking. So there are people, you give the example of Muhammad Yunus, who has asked him, we need this. But there are groups, there are social grassroots organization, community, local, let's say small kids in Berlin, they would have some problem. When they are going to ask some solution for their problem, nobody's paying attention to them. For example, you have chosen the problem of food wastage, right? How did you decide that this is an important problem? This is just, is it any democratically decided project, or just because some people said, okay, I think this is the one problem I should attack? One. Second question that is also related to this is the role of government. So in this way, how we will enforce the government that they should take action? The problem solving, social problems are the responsibility of the government. We should put pressure on the government so they should take care of these things, right? We are paying taxes to them. So if we stop paying taxes to them, okay, then we can look for other alternatives. So I hope you got my question.
Yeah, I got your question. Well, I think it's a pretty easy way to say that governments are responsible for creating these kind of solutions. I think it's not, yeah, I don't think it's that easy. Governments have certain obligations and they have to make sure that the health system, education, infrastructure, and all of these important structures are working properly in the country. But these global and also local problems we are facing, I think it's not the government's role to solve these problems, because frankly, it's just too much and there's just too many of them. And to then also answer your first question, I think you really need people that are intrinsically motivated to solve a certain issue. And for me, I've been a cook for quite some time, and I really have a passion for that. And I was questioning where this food is actually coming from. So I developed this motivation to solve this supply chain problem. And I think this is the answer to your question. It's nobody telling you to do it, but you yourself developing that motivation to wanting to solve a problem that many of us are facing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was also thinking, or I was expecting, yes, it would be that some people are, of course, I'm not doubting in their sincerity. For example, like what Muhammad Yunus, his goal was to elevate standard of living and reduce poverty, right? And how far these projects are, first of all, how long these projects are sustainable, right? I don't think that this project is still running, one. And second is it still running?
It is still running. It's
okay.
Still very successful. I mean, he's not in the organization anymore because the government of Bangladesh decided that he should not fulfill this position anymore because it's partly run by the government now. I think they own about 20%, so they have a say in the operational structure. And it's law in Bangladesh that people over 60 are not supposed to work in public positions anymore. And he was actually 70 when they decided that he has to retire. Okay. He's been very critical of this because he actually has or had the fear, or still has the fear, that the government is using these microloans to actually pressure some individuals and also using it again for profit maximization and not for maximizing the welfare and solving this problem of poverty in Bangladesh.
And don't you think that if we democratize the bigger corporations, and then the social problem would be included in this process? So if any corporation, for example, I can give you a very concrete example, auto industry in Germany, it is a very powerful lobby. And civil societies organization, they are demanding for a strong public transport network, right? And so it will be cheaper. For example, another example is in Tallinn in Estonia. The government has offered a complete free transport system in the whole country. First it started in their capital in Tallinn, and now it is all over the country. Right? But they don't have a strong auto lobby, so they could do it. But here in Germany, there are also organizations. In particular, I have just a few days ago, I read a report from Pirate Party, the political party in Germany. They have a very good plan for a free public transport system, right? So why these things cannot be put forward? So here you see that the public or political party is standing on it, and it is a democratic process. Do you think a corporate auto industry can do such things because they are not democratized? So if any project what you or other social entrepreneurs are doing, I am afraid their sincerity, their goal is right to solve the social problem, but the priorities, how they would handle it or how they will approach it, this is, I am afraid of it, that they would lack here. Do you understand my question?
No, not 100%. So I understood.
In one problem, there is a democratic process behind it. So, and there another party which has no democratic process behind it, but they have positive intention to solve problems.
Well, I don't think these problems are interlinked. I think some of the problems need to be solved by the government, especially if you're talking about public transport, which has an incredible high fixed cost, and those can be just regulated by the government versus enterprises that are starting off relatively small. And having a certain vision to better the world in a certain aspect is, I think these shouldn't be mixed, you know? Does that answer the question?
I am not asking to mix them. I am asking that why such things which have democratic backing, the people, the entrepreneurs, they are not coming for these things. The problems which are democratically elected or selected. So these are the people, they want to solve these problems. So I don't see any social entrepreneur coming for such things. They find the problems, yeah, of course, this exists, and they come up with their solution. So
exactly.
Yes, but the people but they are wanting, nobody pays attention to them.
So you're suggesting that through democratic votes, these topics should be determined and then a solution should be built to these problems?
Yes, that's why I asked initially to Nora that if there is a democratic backing behind it, right, any project, right, which is a community backing it has, then we can talk about it. Okay, this is suitable or not. Of course, there can be failure in both sides.
Well, as I said, most of these people are really unreasonable that are starting these enterprises, and at first they usually don't have the democratic backing because people see things differently, and that's why I think these topics are also not really interlinked, because topics that have a democratic backing should definitely be solved, but these are usually not the ones that social innovators are keen after, because they are trying to
Exactly.
innovate.
Yes, they are not after this what people are asking for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is what I was thinking. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
I think actually Bruno had a question that's in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
What do you think about the role of regulations? Do you think that these social responsible innovations can survive without state support? And do you think if you have like very rigid laws in one region of the world, like the European Union, this open the doors that all these problems and just move to another lower income area, like we have seen with pollution and other work and environmental issues?
Mm-hmm. So I think let's start with the first question. The role of regulations. I think yeah, the regulations of the market is needed, especially nowadays, because we can see in many areas of everyday economics how people are misusing their power. So regulations play a huge role, and they are vital. And do you think that social responsibility business can survive direct competition against more traditional companies? Yes, I think so. Mainly because these young enterprises that are actually popping out of the ground quite frequently at the moment, they are distinguishing themselves from these more traditional companies, and they have different approaches of solving problems. And to me, it is much more appealing, and I also think to many people in my generation of us, it is actually super important to find this purpose in your work. And more traditional companies tend to not give you that purpose, but rather give you a bigger paycheck. But I think that's not sustainable in the long run. Plus, most of these businesses don't have a vision. So I think that social enterprises can compete against these more traditional companies and actually have benefits, not in a sense that they have more capital and they can maybe do more research and development, and they can develop quicker product cycles, but they have an advantage because they're the ones that are being innovative and bringing the products that the society is demanding. So these more sustainable solutions that are actually contributing to the overall welfare.
Okay, I think that answered my question.
Okay, thanks for asking, Bruno.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think regulation has a huge role to play. For example, Che was asking more about the government role, and Felix was talking more about social bottom-up change. So the top-down and the bottom-up initiative has both roles, because as currently we are based on that capitalist system where the environmental cost or the external cost or external benefit, be it environmental or social benefits, are not incorporated in the price when goods and services are exchanged. Sometimes regulations helps bring in the account the external environmental benefits and cost into the price of goods and services. And to a certain extent, regulations such as for example, under the new EU taxonomy for sustainable investment, they have come up with the conditions that all banks and financial institutes in Europe, they should have certain percentage of their lending lent to sustainable business and sustainable initiatives. So, for example, EU guideline for Euro 5, Euro 6 standards, these are all regulatory initiative for environmental change. So yeah, both has a role, I would say. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the contribution. Very well explained.
Question about sort of like, what is the optimal amount of waste to some degree? Because like, I was thinking about this with the junk food project and surplus as well. This supermarket that is kind of based off waste food, and there's kind of these social entrepreneurships developing, but like, I'm just wondering, like, food waste is probably inevitable, but then surely the best thing is that we don't have any.
Yeah,
so I'm trying to understand like the balance of like, what's optimal waste and how do you?
Well, let me answer with a quote. I think waste is just a resource in the wrong place. I think you can use any resource and try to work towards a more circular model, where every so-called waste can be a resource, and that's where we should aim towards to, because that's how we really become more sustainable. And does that does that help?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. That's clears it for my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably hard sometimes to find ways to use these resources in a good way. But I think if you're keen on solving a problem of, let's say, plastic waste, because it's also been in the media for quite some time, then you try to look at plastic as a resource, and then you try to find a way how to use this resource and give it value, so we all see value in it. There's also a startup called 4Ocean. Some of you might have heard. They're producing these bracelets from plastic waste, and you can order them online, and all the revenue goes into them trying to get more of this plastic waste from the ocean. It's, I think, maybe a good example for this waste question.
Yeah, just to kind of extend on that more, it's kind of because with the waste, the metaphor in my mind for plastic waste is the flooding kitchen. And like, sometimes it feels like the tap is on and the kitchen is flooding, And sometimes it feels like a lot of the waste, the zero waste solutions are just trying to mop the floor up. And like what we should be doing maybe with plastic. I mean, this is kind of like, it's obviously you can't change the system overnight, but like what we should be potentially doing is just turning the tap off, and just like redesigning it such that there is no plastic. Then I know that because there is plastic, we have to come up with solutions. So it's like, this is why I find it a challenging topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's up to you, Will, to find a good market-based solution to solve this problem. I've seen some countries using, for example, banana leaves to package their foods, and there are definitely solutions around, but they need to be implemented or basically favored over the others. But yeah, it's a hard way to go, because you've got all these corporations in place that you need to convince of this better way to go, which is probably the major driver and major challenge.
Yeah, but things like this is where the problem lies. You know, if you, for example, see the plastic that ends up in ocean, for example, they all come from a different. Most of them they come from different parts of South Asia. You know, and Europe and United States, another rich part of the world, are just like exporting trash or producing things in Southeast Asia and just dumping it there. You know. It's how regulation at a level of the European Union or another regional power can actually tackle this effectively. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I agree. It's really difficult.
Felix.
Sorry.
Do you
Yeah,
want to say
Alex.
anything?
No, was it Alex? No. Greetings to Alex, by the way, wherever you may be. I'm just seeing that you're in here. Hi, Alex.
I want to ask one question. Do you know any social entrepreneur which is working on the cause of the problem rather than solving the symptoms? I mean, when I don't know, first of all, so many entrepreneurs, and the few who I know, like just once you mentioned that who is taking the plastic from the sea and then turning into bands and so on, or Muhammad Yunus, and there is another social entrepreneur organization I knew which is recycling the waste in Africa, and so all these corporate organizations. To me, it seems that the bigger multinational corporations, they are creating shit, and there are other corporations, they are coming to clean it. So,
yeah.
And those who are creating the problem, first of all, how did the plastic end up in ocean? So do you know any organization, any social entrepreneur who is attacking or going after the causes of the problem rather than fighting with the symptoms?
Well, there's several that come to mind. So first of all, I think Muhammad Yunus is a good example here again, because he's actually directly trying to fight poverty, and because we've talked about food waste quite a lot, and I have to admit, SPRK is really also just trying to solve the symptoms rather than the problem of these really long international global chains, supply chains. But there is a startup or a movement from France. In German, it's called Marktschwärmerei. I don't know if anyone in here may be able to translate that. I'll write it in the chat. And they are trying to build a network between producers and consumers directly, where the producers can set the price and the consumers can buy at a given time, which is actually making the whole supply of vegetable and fruits that are regional in the long term obsolete. And this is one I would say that are trying to really tackle the problem of these global supply chains. This is one that comes to mind, and I don't know if I've got another good example. Not right now.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Are there any questions? Oh.
I have a question for you, Felix.
Mm-hmm.
So, personally, when I was at SPRK, I thought there were some difficulties that SPRK had to deal with, and like I wanna know now, like as a social entrepreneur, like what were the difficulties you had to deal with?
That's really not an easy one to answer, because I mean, we started off with this one idea and it really transforms all the time, because we came across barriers and then we kind of had to adapt our model and change it. One major one, for example, being that at the beginning we mainly wanted to build this platform, but we stumbled across that the suppliers wouldn't give us the food if we just did the platform, because we would just pass on the products and be a competition, so-called. So we had to find a way to deal with that. Then there were other, I really, that's that's a really broad question. Do you have a specific area that you're interested in?
Yeah, actually, just I found that like because like surrounding of this like social enterprises quite, I mean, they were really skeptical and also conventional, I think, to the idea that this company had. And then yeah, so that's why like communication with them and like having a like strong partnership with them was, yeah, what I felt was quite like difficult. So like I think is that the only thing you like SPRK is was experiencing, or do you think also other social enterprises would also have these difficulties in their way to do their business?
Well, I think every social enterprise that is being founded will stumble across many difficulties in sales, as you just mentioned. So our relations with the NGOs has actually not been that big of a deal. It's rather hard to identify who's actually behind producing the food for these NGOs, because usually this is outsourced, and this was also one major challenge we have faced. But through bettering our offer and making it super attractive, I would have said we solved this, and now we have actually several customers that we already work with, even though we are not financed yet, and it's all a bootstrap model. But yeah, this has worked out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yunsun, can I add to your question? I had a similar question regarding the challenge. It was mind-boggling to see the statistics. Felix, you said like 30% of entire production
Yeah, it's crazy.
is from waste. That's crazy. And if we look at Berlin, there have been some waste waste companies which looks at waste, and I had asked the same question. When you said regarding supplier, who are your supplier? Where do you get like unused waste? Are these the big supermarket, Railway, Lidl, or is it small farmers for small suppliers?
Well, I can't talk about the concrete names. Of course, we're not public yet, but I can say so much. It's that we are talking with big distribution centers and big logistics hubs and wholesales. But the aim is, of course, to cover the whole supply chain from farmer, because we actually know that many products are actually being wasted because they're not fulfilling the standards of the European Union. Just for you to know, the carrots might have two stems, or the cucumber might be too crooked.
Yes.
There are so many waste cases, and we try to partner with all the players along the food chain, and we try to make them food waste free. So that's our promise.
I see. Sorry, just one last question. So when we talk about food waste, is it because of the standard in terms of shape, in terms of from the farmer side, or are major chunk of food waste in Germany because of the expiry date in the supermarket? They have to.
So there's all the cases you can imagine. If we are talking about wholesale, about farmers, it's usually not good looking or imperfect foods that are being sorted out. But if you look at wholesales, it might be like the best before date that is coming too close, then they throw it out. It might be a whole charge of products that just have dents or anything like that, so they're not optically perfect. So that's why they get sorted out. And there's so many waste cases if you go down to the supermarket, where they have like 2 kilo bags of apples, and one of them looks a bit squishy. They sort out the whole bag, even though the rest, the 1.9 kilogram of the apples, is still perfectly edible. So the waste cases are endless. So differing from the different stage, of course, that you're in the supply chain.
So in terms of the waste, is it in terms of percentage, is it mainly from the supermarket waste, or does it is it from the farmer, the production side, and it doesn't meet the regulation?
So, well, if you look at the whole food waste in Germany, 60% is happening in the supply chain. And actually 40% of the waste is occurring at all of our homes. So 40% accounts for the consumer. And then you've got different, so at the supermarket level, it's roughly 8%, I think. At the farmers, it's around 10%.
Okay, thank you. That's a very interesting statistics. Thank you.
Forum, I would also like to add one more thing. Actually, we are living in the age of abundance. So we have overproduction, not only in food, in every field. So there is a lot of food from the consumer, from the producers end till to the consumer end, it is being wasted. So first of all, the farmers, they are getting, the EU farmers I'm talking about, they are getting subsidies.
Yeah,
right,
incredible subsidies. Yeah.
Yes, and they are producing then the food which is too much. And what are they doing? First of all, a lot of is wasted here, and which is left, then they export it to Africa, and then they destroy the price in African countries. Right, and there the farmer, for example, the France is sending the baguette, the French baguette. They are selling it there. The baguette is I think it is in Ghana or maybe in Senegal, somewhere in Africa. There it is expensive. The local grown baguette is expensive than the French baguette. And chicken, They are exporting chicken in Africa. So there is a lot of abundance which are producing here, right? And when they are unable to consume here in Europe, it is a lot of is wasted, and the rest is exported to African countries or other places to destroy the market in other countries.
You're absolutely right with your criticism. I agree 100%. And I think the reason for that is that we are so used to always having the opportunity to shop everything to an extensive amount and to everything being perfectly looking, that of course there's going to be such a surplus and such an overproduction. And there again, I would like to touch base on that quote from the event where Milton Friedman was stated, these companies are then looking for profit maximization, and that's why they're exporting these things to the poorer continents and destroying markets there. So it's really unethical behavior, and I 100% agree that this is not working in our system, not at all.
I just want to add one story to that. When I was in Humboldt University during my PhD, we studied politics and things like that. And in Germany, no one wants to touch farmer subsidies. In Germany, it's bad politics. Though farmers are the marginalized, but in terms of vote bank, the romanticizing of farmers and agriculture, no one wants to touch that. So there is high subsidies for milk farmers, dairy farmers in Germany. So taking your case of baguette, Che,
Yes.
the milk, the subsidies given to dairy farmers in Germany are killing the market in Ghana, for example. And then the German government, like GIZ, they would come up with international funding and projects where they are trying to support the dairy farmers in Ghana. They spend 10-15 million euros, but the funding system is just skewed. Even if you train the farmers in Ghana for dairy farming, when you get such a low price milk product from Germany,
So
they can't just compete.
They cannot compete.
The milk powder, they can't compete with the over subsidized milk powder from Germany. Yeah, so these are the irony or the limitations of public policy making.
Capitalism.
And the free market.
This is capitalism.
And the free market, exactly.
But this is another hypocrisy here. We say, okay, we should have a free trade, right? No states regulations, right? Government should not interfere, should not support, should not subsidize it, right? But at home, the Western countries, they are subsidizing everything here. But when any other country is trying to do, oh no, they are the bad guys. Look what the Venezuelan did. They said that, hey, what you are doing, taking a lot of money from our oil. Now we want to renegotiate. We want the money should stay here. What they did, they put sanctions on them. This the Western politics is there.
Yes, actually, guys, we are now running out of time, so I think sadly we need to leave soon. So is that okay for you guys and Felix? Yeah, it's supposed to be 1 hour, but I think the time is over. So yeah, we have part 2 next week. So yeah, about this same topic. So you can join that session again. So Felix, do you wanna have a closing comment or something?
Well, first of all, I think next week is actually going to be about proper CSR, not social entrepreneurship. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate that you took your Friday night off to listen about me talking about social entrepreneurship, and I really appreciate all these interesting questions you had. And yeah, let's all dive into a great weekend and hope to talk to you guys soon. thanks for the invitation again.
Thank you, Felix. So thank you everyone to join our tonight's event. So have a good evening and see you next week.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you, Yunsun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.